Welcome to the Literally First Class podcast, where I will teach you how to overcome anxiety and achieve somatic success. I'm your host, Carrie Ford. I'm a somatic success and holistic life coach here to bring humor, insight, and wisdom to the modern day woman that wants to feel alive in her daily life. You ready? Come on, I saved you a seat in first class. Welcome back to the Literally First Class podcast. Today, I am joined by an awesome guest expert, Dr. Rafid Fadul, who is the Chief Medical Officer of Cenegenics. And you guys know, I've been talking about since my breast explant surgery and how I got involved with Cenegenics. I mean, how I even worked for Cenegenics years ago, that they are a brand partner, but they're also such an important role in my personal journey, in my healing. And I'm so excited to bring Rafid on with us today. Hi, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Yeah. So first, I would love for you to share a little bit about your background and your current role with Cenegenics.
Yeah, for sure. So by training, I'm actually a pulmonary and critical care physician. And I did a lot of work in lung transplant space before I really kind of started on this journey of longevity. And really it was because of my experiences in the intensive care unit and what we were doing for patients at kind of at extremis, right? At the end of life or near the end of life. And our job was obviously to try to prevent that from happening. But it felt to me like the horse was out of the barn more often than not. And the right answer, if I could kind of rewrite history and maybe wave a magic wand, would be to intervene much earlier in these people's lives, years, decades earlier, to prevent them from ever having to see me in the intensive care unit, right? Because at that point, most of the damage is already done. And that really was what spurred me kind of thinking about longevity. And then I really, myself as a patient, I worked at some really amazing institutions like Cleveland Clinic and Georgetown and others. And while I was there, I would go seek my own, primary care, established care, just like everyone else would. But I didn't feel like I was getting the answers that I wanted for kind of what was, my optimal self, right? Like you get very good care that's, kind of guideline driven, what we call USPSTF guidelines, the United States Preventive Task Force, right? So, but I know all that stuff. I know what check my cholesterol this often, get a colonoscopy this often, et cetera. And that wasn't really those rules are great for population, but they're not really great for an individual trying to optimize for his or her optimal self. And so I didn't feel like I was getting what I wanted when I sought care out from kind of standard pathways. And so part of the story that led me to Cenegenics was I wanted to go to a practice that I would actually go be a patient of, right? And I wanted a place where I could have kind of a shared decision-making dialogue about optimization, right? And so that was really one of the main drivers of what led me to Cenegenics. And I was allured by them in particular. As you know, there's a lot of players that are popping up in the space as of recent years, but they were really the ones to do this 27 years ago, right? They started and they were ridiculed, frankly. Like they were
Ahead of their time.
Way ahead of their time. And I just saw this quote that I'm probably going to butcher that says, when a new idea comes out, it's initially it's ridiculed, then it's violently opposed, and then it's taken as self-evident, right? Of course, that you should be doing this all the time. And so at that time, they were in that ridiculed and then violently opposed phase, but they were truly the pioneers to look at hormone replacement therapy and start looking at longevity as its own space. And now there's obviously tons of Me Too's that are in the marketplace. Most of them, I would say, greater than 90% have popped up in the last handful of years. And a lot of them they're more or less retail. They're just kind of selling their services that I think are really kind of commoditized and not really evidence-based. And so that's kind of what led me to Cenegenics within the longevity space. That's why I chose to kind of align with them.
Yeah. Oh man, Cenegenics has been, it's funny because, I'm personal friends with Christy, the CEO, and she's been a client of mine. And then I grew up with Rudy. It's just like, it keeps finding its way back into my life. I worked for Cenegenics, but I love what you guys stand for. And I also want to go back to what you were just saying, which was you wanted to have a little bit more control over the longevity path so that people didn't end up in the seat on the doctor's table in the room in front of you as a result of what could have been prevented if they had the knowledge and the foresight. And, Cenegenics uses a whole array of advanced technology so that if you were to even just make 1 degree or 1% of change, you could completely change the trajectory of your path. And we're talking like not next month, not in 6 months necessarily, but in 10 years, 30 years, 40 years, God willing that we all live that long. But if you catch it early enough, I mean, I'm 39, I'll be 40 in a couple months. And part of me was like, ooh, is this too early to consider longevity? What would you say to someone that's, in my age bracket that's like in their 30s, perimenopause is looming. I'm not there yet, but there are concerns as I approach my 40s. Maybe I want to have another baby. We're in this, place where we could do both. And it's interesting to be kind of like, oh, I'm my parents' age. And also, am I too young for this?
You're definitely not too young.
Yeah.
And I don't think any age is too young, frankly, because how we look in our 80s, 90s, God willing, our hundreds, right, is a product of what we do in our 20s, 30s, and 40s, right? So it's absolutely not too soon to think about this and to intervene upon these issues from now, right? So a lot of longevity has to do with, it's like a war of attrition, right? So every day that you do the right thing, it banks and it compounds over time. And conversely, every day you do the wrong things also banks and compounds over time. So it's absolutely not too early. I mean, I would encourage people to do it, even if you're in optimal health and everything is like, if I could, if I knew already that you were in optimal health, it's still not too early to think about it, because what you do now influences what happens decades from now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's assuming that you're in optimal health. I know many people who outwardly have no signs or symptoms, right? But
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean that inwardly, physiologically, things are not brewing. And I can tell you countless examples of people in their 30s who had evidence of heart disease and they hadn't picked it up, but for getting a coronary CT.
Mm-hmm.
And people thought I was kind of like crazy for pushing them to do this, but like, this is what I want for my loved ones. I want them to get as much data as possible, as early as possible, so they can get their baselines and understand where they are. Even if they presume that they are in fact healthy, oftentimes we just don't see what's brewing underneath.
Yeah, your baseline becomes your blueprint in many ways, because what really was eye-opening for me and what I've seen with the evolution of technologies, even that you've expanded since I worked for y'all in 2012, I think it was, as I went through the FI scan at the Miami Center. And I was like, whoa, like this is the difference between I have a little knee pain. I've got a little, I had a brachial plexus injury from my breast implant. So I was like, I got a little like neck crick in my neck, but like 20 years down the line, that's where we start to see the body start to adapt and, have biases and preferences to
Yep.
compensate as a strategy, of course, a wise strategy of the body to like continue moving, but it's not ideal and an optimum movement, right? I don't want to age where I start having a limp because of my knee and because of this foot. And then this little tiny crick that over a long period of time now becomes like my spine is curved and I've got a rotated hip as a result, and like all the ways that affects my body. And so I suddenly had this visual in my brain of like, wow, this is like truly the trajectory of and the difference between, to your point, doing all the right things moving forward or doing all the wrong things.
Yeah, it really is, when you're thinking about like a marathon of life, it really is those little small differences, right? In care, where, I remember like your story is really resonant with me because I had this injury of my toe that I, again, went to see a primary care doctor at Cleveland Clinic, the world's best hospital system. And he's like, oh, let's just stick you in a boot. I don't really know what it is. Plain film was negative. And it's, let's just, get you off it for 6 weeks and see what happens. And like, that's not like, it left me really wanting more. I was like, this is not really the answer I was looking for. And then, I did my FI scan, right? And it's funny because I'm looking at myself on the Zoom right now and I can kind of see it. I had shoulder surgery, and I had compensatory muscle buildup around that left shoulder and my traps. And they called it out on the phi scan. They're like, yeah, you because of the muscles here, this shoulder rides a bit higher, and that's something I'm like now cognizant of and aware of, and because that if left unto itself will then lead to back issues, right? And then it leads to all these other, then so the back issue leads to other things like so intervening on these small interventions, very early on makes a huge difference. And Rudy talks about this a lot. And actually, I remember reading this in that book Atomic Habits. Right, if you're going from New York to LA and you change course by like 1 degree, from when you're like way down to Mexico, right?
Yeah.
So,
yep.
So it really does make a difference what we do every single day, right? And a lot of this, by the way, we have amazing technology to give us diagnostics, information, and even therapeutics.
Mm-hmm.
I think really kind of it starts with personal ownership, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it starts with willingness to seek out that information, intervene upon that information, and then again, do this like war of attrition every single day. Do a little bit, right? Be a little more positive than you were the day before, right? That's really like all we can ask for. But if you do that in aggregate, you're going to have this not just long life, but really full life, right? You're going to feel great throughout the entirety of your life, which is that's what our goal is, right? Like nobody wants to be 100 years old in a wheelchair and debilitated.
No.
They want to be. I bet you if I asked 100 people, they would all say, I'd rather be 95, but a vibrant 95, playing tennis or golf or whatever it is that I like to do with my family and loved ones and my friends, rather than have an extra 10, 15, 20 years, but not have quality of life, right? So for us, and then, we make this differentiation between health span and lifespan, right? Health span being how many healthy years you have versus lifespan, like total chronologic years.
Living, right.
Yeah. And like, being alive is not the same as living. And that's the big distinction that we try to hit home a lot.
So I'm curious because I as a woman, it's very comforting to hear you have had frustrations in healthcare as a doctor. But I have had frustrations as well because right before I was doing research to get my implants out, I advocated for myself and I wanted to get a 3D mammogram. And they told me, well, you're too young. Are you sure you want this? And it was like, just simply by being an advocate for my own health, I was almost like gaslit and made to feel wrong or kind of crazy that it's unnecessary. And it's like, I don't really give a fuck what the protocol is. Like, I want to know the answers. I want to make sure I'm making an educated decision about my body, regardless of whether or not I'm supposed to wait another year or two for this thing. So it's so interesting. I don't feel like healthcare in the general public, in the general sense, supports longevity. They treat the symptoms. They don't get to the root cause. And, I have found it to be very frustrating as a woman where you just kind of show up and it's always like there's these little nitpicky comments that are like you're in your head or you're a little bit crazy and it's a little neurotic that you're like trying to think ahead versus like, well, there's no problem now. And then they just send you back on your way. They might do a baseline blood panel. One time I asked for a hormone panel before I started with Cenegenics and they were like, why? And I was like, why not? I feel like maybe these migraines could be connected to hormones. I'm not sure. And I was again made to feel very wrong for advocating for myself and listening to my body. So can you talk about the Cenegenics difference? Because it's a night and day difference for me, like general healthcare versus the Cenegenics experience, which is extremely white glove. It's extremely custom. And every 3 months, like the phlebotomist comes to my house, we do an extensive blood panel. There's 92 biomarkers. And like beyond that, there's additional, choices, but we pivot. We strategize every time we get the blood work back. And I've seen in crazy improvements already. So I'm curious in your words, what you see the Cenegenics difference to be since you have like your finger on the pulse of, healthcare and age management.
Yeah. Well, first, I'm sorry that you had those experiences. That I just listening to it sounds incredibly frustrating, and I'm sorry that you had to deal with those things. And when I think about it's funny because we call women's health a specialty, but it's like 50% of the country. So like, why is that a specialty? Like that to me seems like really stupid. And we generally do a poor job of managing women's health in general in this country. With all that being said, I think your experiences, unfortunately, are probably true regardless of gender, because we also don't do a great job of empowering patients. And when we talk about the difference of Cenegenics, it's really that. I mean, our patients are they're hungry for knowledge. They're curious. And even the ones who don't know the right questions to ask know that they want to be an advocate of themselves and they want to be a participant in their own healthcare, right? So the idea of a paternalistic medicine is dead. And we should just like leave flowers on its grave and never bring it back and never mention its name, because that way of providing care is it leaves everyone wanting, right? It's not a good way to deliver care, flat out, right? And the alternative is the shared decision making approach, which is the one where we on the medical side empower you on the patient side. Say, here's the data that you need to know to make a good decision that's right for you, not that's right for 95% of people. And here's what the studies say for, like, again, USPSTF guidelines. Like, those are all great and they're good for like population management, but it's not good for like carry management, right? And so because they're not built for carry, they're built for like, how do I make a decision for everyone, right? But you're not looking for a decision for everyone. You're looking for a decision for you, right? And what's best for carry, right? And my job is to basically be, I use the analogy a lot of, like, I don't know if you ever were forced to read Dante's Inferno in high school or anything, but there was Dante who was going through this journey, and then next to him was Virgil, his guide, right? Like, that's who we are. Our job is to be along the ride with you on your journey and being there to support you and give you the data that you need to make intelligent decisions, right? That are consistent with your values and your beliefs and your goals, right? So everyone's goals are different, right? Like, I can tell you from personal experience, I've had patients, who, were doing living wills, and they say, I don't care if I'm living in a nursing home and I am a vegetable. If I can get an extra heartbeat, I want that. And then I have other patients who say, no. If I'm not doing X, fill in the blank with the activity they love, right? Playing golf, doing this, doing that, whatever. Yeah. I don't want, that's not life. And I don't want that. So, I would go to comfort care in those situations. So everyone's goals are different, right? And our job, again, at Cenegenics, is to figure out, like, all right, let's take that time, not the 15-minute visit for a new patient in your primary care office, which is like basically a factory. Let's take 2, 3, 4 hours. Just let's sit and talk. Let me know everything about you. Let me know your history. Let me know what the stressors are in your life. Let me know your geographic patterns. Like, do you live in a city where there's like low air quality? Do you live in the country where there may be like more mold in the ground? Like, things like that. Like, these are all relevant questions that, frankly, you just don't have enough time to ask in 15 minutes. Like, no one does, unless you're one of those auctioneers who speaks, 300 words, every second, right? There's no way that you can digest all that information, and certainly you can't retain it. And our goal, like, I often say this, like, we're glorified servants. We're here for you, right? And so how can I do that if I'm doing more time, if it was like 10 minutes of time, or alternatively, if I'm spending all that time, shoving down like generalized guidelines down your face? Like, that's not personalized care. And that's what we're striving for. We're striving for this optimal experience for the person sitting across the table from us.
Yeah. This episode is presented by Cenegenics. I recently partnered with the leader in the performance health age management industry, Cenegenics. Today's healthcare system is made to treat people with health problems, not prevent them. And that is where Cenegenics comes in. They are the world's best age management health solution, fueled by sophisticated data, advanced technology like the Brainwavy and the DEXA scan I mentioned, and metabolic science. This is for busy women at the peak of their career who also want to achieve peak performance, both cognitively and physically, using a physician-led program that is completely custom to your history, biomarkers, and needs. They've helped more than 49,000 executives, just like me and you, elevate health, reduce stress, and optimize body composition. So we not only look good, but we feel good at any age and any level of leadership. As a brand partner, Cenegenics is offering listeners a free 10-minute consultation to see if the Performance Health program is your next step in elite health. Use my link below in the show notes to book. And that is the evidence-based approach too that you were referencing right before we hit record here too. I think about the DEXA scan, which, is a body imaging technology. And it really helps to determine whether or not you're at high risk for breaking bones in really important places, your femur,
Yep.
lower back, and your hips, specifically places that kind of are like, the beginning of the end. At least they were for my grandparents when they broke a hip or something like that. It was just, it kind of knocked them out of the game. And, I think about the BMI, for example. You take Rudy, who looks like The Rock and is like
Literally.
bodybuilder, and he's considered obese, morbidly obese, probably according to the US BMI. And so it's like when you have evidence-based technology and research and data points, specifically from a custom approach, like how you're going to tackle each and every patient. And again, in that co-creation, like for example, I could say, oh, I'm, overweight on the BMI, but then you get on the DEXA scan and you're like, oh, well, I'm very high in muscle. And, actually, according to the ratios with this and the actual data points, the specific evidence, I'm not obese at all. I'm not overweight at all. Like the BMI is just this generic cookie cutter formula that doesn't take into account all the unique qualities of my body and how my body, composition looks and all the things. So, and then beyond that, like the checkpoints that you guys offer with your PHA, the personal health care, or personal health assessment, which you guys can find in the show notes. You can go ahead and book a call. You get $1,000 off, as a listener of the podcast. You can go ahead and book that. But part of the checkpoints of the PHA is repeating this DEXA scan. So if you gained weight, well, where did you gain weight? Is it muscle? Right? Or you lost weight? Did you lose fat or did you lose muscle? Well, now we know. We're not guessing. So can you talk about, and I'm just using the DEXA scan because it's super visual and helpful, but maybe that or beyond that, the evidence-based approach that Cenegenics takes, which is, I think, vastly different than most approaches.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think you couldn't have given me a better example to riff on, because good luck trying to take that exact use case, try to do that in your primary care office and say, hey, you weighed me and you called me obese or morbidly obese. Can you get a DEXA to see, because I don't think that's really accurate. Insurance won't cover it. The doctor will probably scoff at you and say, unless you're like a 65-year-old lady looking for osteoporosis, we're generally not going to do it. Right. But again, like you're waiting way too long and you're not using modalities that are available to you with amazing insights and data. Like, why would you not use it? Right. It's like laughable to not use this data that you have at your disposal. But that's exactly the point, is that, the luxury of Cenegenics is that, we take all this data, everything, the newest modalities, the newest technologies, obviously everything with evidence behind it. We're not doing like fancy red objects that we're not, chasing the latest fads. We're doing like evidence-based approaches, and we're combining that for personalized care so that I can tell you, yeah, don't listen to, I love what you said, BSMI. I'm going to steal that one. That was good.
Yeah.
Don't listen to that. Like, look at your DEXA. And here's of the proportion of the fat, here's the visceral fat. Here's what we care about. And here's why we care about it. Right. Like, those are the data points that's that extra incremental delta that's going to be super meaningful in the long run. Right. Because it guides your decision-making now. Right. Like, you don't want to wait on some kind of time bomb. Another example I'll give you is Clearly, right, which is the coronary CT. So it looks at your heart vessels and gives a really, really good look at not just the vessels and the plaque, but the type of plaque, which makes a huge difference, right, in terms of risk factors. So when we think about like calcium scores, right, which is the one that the recent test that was kind of like the precursor to this, calcium scores are good. They're definitely indicative of disease, but calcified plaques are generally lower risk than non-calcified plaques. So like, yes, you're telling me like how much plaque burden I have, but like you're telling me like the one that's not as likely to cause me, a heart attack, right? Like I care about the one that's going to kill me, right? And so getting the Clearly is super valuable because it gives you that data. That's exactly the data that you need. And then you can titrate your medications, not just based on the numbers on your lipid panel, which is all they're going to test in a primary care office, right? You can titrate it based on these other variables, based on your ApoB, based on your lipoprotein little a, based on the actual Clearly results. You can see that non-calcified plaque going up or down. That's the stuff that we care about. And that's the stuff that's going to make you live longer, right? Like we have to, again, like longevity and thinking about health span, it's the avoidance of disease, right? And that's what health span is. It's avoidance of disease. So how do we avoid it? We take proactive steps to prevent it. And again, this is one of the like broad strokes. This is one of the very big distinctions between Cenegenics and, for example, the standard care that you would get at any, even like executive physicals, like concierge doctors, executive physicals, big money, not just, the primary care doc that we would see at, the neighborhood or like great institutions. Those are all reactive in nature. And the preventive medicine that you get, and I'm using air quotes for the listeners, is it's minimal at best, right? You're getting just like the basic standard guidelines, regardless of your family history, your genetics, your previous labs, your stated wishes, your concerns. Like these are all off to the wayside. We have a generally reactive way of medicine. That's the standard versus a proactive preventive approach with Cenegenics, that's really that's what, if you're interested in longevity, whether you go on your own or go with us, like that's the reality of things. You must be proactive and you must take a data rich approach to your journey.
Yeah. And beyond that too, we're reacting to the signs and symptoms, but Cenegenics prevents you from getting there to have those at all. And that's the difference, right? Most standard healthcare says, well, there's nothing wrong right now. Come see me when you're sick or disease or something else is wrong. And Cenegenics says, well, why wait till there's something wrong and you're in pain? Or it's like, you're already down that trajectory. You're already on the plane to Mexico when you wanted to go to New York, right. To your point.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
We don't want to end up here. So, taking control of your health. And I mean, honestly, health is the ultimate wealth. And I know that it sounds cheesy and so cliche, but you think about it, like when I used to teach spin classes in group fitness, I would say, like, how awesome is it that we get to have a choice to even come here? There are some people that are in a hospital bed, they're in a wheelchair, like they don't even get to choose to be active. Don't waste that gift. You don't have your health, you have nothing. So you're successful in your career, but you're not going to be able to show up for that unless you're healthy. You're with your kids and you're a great parent. Well, guess what? You can't be that parent if you're not healthy. Health is number one.
I could not agree with you more. I mean, the reality is, like, you don't have shit if you don't have your health. Like, that's just totally. It's as simple as that. Like, and I can't tell you how many people, and I'm a little bit preachy to my friends and family about this because I see this every day. Don't forget, like in ICU, I see people who would freaking cut off their hand if it meant like one more week of time, of meaningful time, one more year of life to think of all the I love yous, the birthdays, the anniversaries, the friends, like all those moments that they can't have because their health is withered, right? And they've neglected it all along the way. Because like, oh, it'll be fine. And by the way, I'm probably guilty of that too. Until I joined Cenegenics 2 years ago. I was 41, right? And I was like, oh, I'm in good health, but I'll do the PHA just to understand the patient experience. And but I'm fine. I'm in good shape. My last physical is God knows when prior to that, but like I do the terrible doctor thing of like managing some of my care myself, which you definitely should not do. But anyway, my brother, who's also a doctor, like looking at me laughing right now. So, but I went and I did my diagnostics, and I found that I had a couple levels that were just drastically off. And at the time, I was under a lot of stress and sleeping poorly, traveling a lot. So my eating habits were like really inconsistent. And I was like, oh, I'm not feeling my best, probably just because of those things, like because of, like my lifestyle and whatever else. And that's what it was. It was, I had these abnormal values that upon initiating treatment, all of a sudden, like things got a little bit better. Right. And again, if I went to a doctor, like a traditional doctor, they would have picked up on none of those things. Right. These were not part of the standard lab panels that you would expect. These were like random tests that we were getting. And I feel really grateful for that. This is what I was looking for as a patient that I wasn't getting from even the best institutions in the country. I wasn't getting that.
That's so wild. If you had to pick one of your favorite technologies that Cenegenics uses at one of the centers, and I know it varies slightly center to center, what is your favorite technology that Cenegenics uses and why?
My favorite and least favorite is the DEXA. So, and I say my least favorite because when you go on it for the first time, it is very unforgiving truth. It just kind of tells you.
True. You're like, wow, all right.
Yeah, maybe I do have a little more work to do. But by the same token, that's exactly why I like it, because it gives you really accurate data, right? And that data informs your future decision making. So if I had to say one thing, I'd probably say the DEXA scan. I was going to go VO2 max, but I was like, well, that's for like total benefit and all cause mortality. But like in terms of technology, I think the DEXA is the one that I think is probably the most influential in making changes in your day to day, month to month routines.
Yeah, it never ceases to amaze me the level of detail from the DEXA too. I mean, you can tell if someone is right-handed or left-handed because you can see that the right side of their body, and that's what they favor, has a little more muscle than the left
Right.
side, for example. So I remember when I was one of the trainers and one of the, coaches, I would put together often like body part split workouts where we would do like right or left workouts to like even them out essentially.
Yeah.
And also just you might look healthy on the outside, but what's going on the inside with the android fat around the organs, the visceral fat that really puts you at high risk for cardiovascular
Exactly.
complications. So, it matters what's inside, not just like what it appears to be, and what
I
starts out as a tiny molecule of an issue, potentially even it showing up in blood work, like you're talking about now, maximize that time, over time, and it continues to grow. And now 20 years, 30 years down the line, we have a big issue. Had we caught it sooner, it would have been a non-issue.
exactly. I mean, I that's so well said and so astute. And if your listeners could take home one thing, it's that, right? It's like these incremental data points that we can get, and it's available to us. Like we have it, like it's a shame that we're not acting on these and extracting these data up front. But those incremental data points and the actions that we can take based on those data
Mm-hmm.
points, that's all the difference right there. That's the difference between living well into your 90s, hundreds, whatever, versus not, right? And that's what we're all about, essentially, just empowering the individuals with this data, with actionable data to then influence their own outcomes in lives.
Yeah. One last question as we bring it in for a landing today. What is something that you're like the most excited about that Cenegenics is, laying the tracks down for, whether it be this year or in the next 3 years, 5 years? Like what's coming for Cenegenics and the vision that y'all have for the longevity space, age management? I mean, you guys are pioneers, been in the space for 27 years, served over 49,000 executives. Like you guys are OGs in the space. And I'm curious about what's next, because now with social media and the different ways that you can reach people, and again, amazing advancements in technology, I imagine there's some really cool stuff that you guys have planned.
Yeah, I mean, I'll opine on two things. One broad bucket is the fact that the good and bad thing about the fact that longevity is now this like buzzy kind of space.
Poppy word.
Yeah. Like, the nice thing about it is that it's drawing a lot more attention, a lot more money, but not money to well, unfortunately, money to some snake oil people, but the money is going to research. And so as a result of that, you're seeing new data coming out every single day about these new interventions, for things that have been around for a while. Like rapamycin is quite popular nowadays. And there's recent data like showing that maybe it's not the best thing. At least, actually, interestingly enough, I just read a paper a couple of days ago that it's showing more benefit in women than men.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, so just broadly speaking, there's going to be more and more innovation within the performance health longevity space, and we are those stewards for our patients. Like we are the guys who will and girls who will sift through the bullshit and tell you like, yes, this is valid, and that's snake oil. And this has got some good data that may be good for you or not. So like we are taking this robust approach to longevity as a whole, which to me is super exciting because we're on the front of that wave of new data emerging every day. So that's exciting. The second piece is mental health. We're starting to delve deeper into mental health and coaching with respect to our patients. And again, 87% of our patients are C-suite or VP level or higher, right? And so the reality that we have all of these high performing individuals within our patient base, and and I think this is an area of, the deficiencies that we have are all areas of improvement. This is an area that I think that we as a country need to do better about, right? We still have this, these silly stigmas around mental health. And the example I give people is, I love my therapist. I think he's phenomenal. And, I chat with him and I said, you wouldn't drive a car for, 50, 60,000 miles without getting an oil change. Right. That'd be absurd. So like, why would you not just like check in with yourself every so often? Right. So I think we as a country do a bad job of this. And we at Cenegenics are solving that problem for everyone, or we're going to be solving that. So we'll be rolling out new programming around incorporation of mental health into your overall health, because you can't talk about one without the other, frankly. So so that's one of the next big things on the horizon for us.
That's so exciting. And I know you and I have riffed previously about the somatic work and the importance of well-being and metabolizing stress in the body so that you can move through things and increase your window of tolerance, nervous system speak to expand and fluidly move into your nervous system state. So you're not stuck in those sympathetic dominant states of fight flight all the time, which can wear down the body, regardless of your health protocol. And we certainly don't want to undo all the good things that you might be bringing into your body with the nutraceutical line that you guys have and the other things. So stress management is such a huge thing. And in fact, it's a whole pillar at your company, right? So huge. I love that you guys are rolling that out. That's really exciting.
Thanks. Something that we're really keen to do. So the best days, again, we've been around for 27 years, but the best days are in front of us.
Yeah, very exciting. Thank you so much for your time today. And again, as a listener, for being here part of the Literally First Class podcast, you guys can check out that link in my show notes. Go ahead, book yourself a consultation call. It costs nothing just to see if this is a fit for you. The staff is incredible. Tell them I said hello, and they'll give you a complimentary consult call to line up a potential PHA, the personal health assessment, so that you can get the same care that I get and the same kind of technology access that Rafid and I were talking about here today. So go ahead and book that. You get $1,000 off. And again, if you just book the call, it's complimentary. So you can click the link in my show notes below. But I will see you guys next time here on Literally First Class. Keep it first class.
I hope you enjoyed your flight, and I'll see you on board again soon.
Seriously, though, thanks for listening. If you're ready to take this work deeper and upgrade your mind, I want to invite you to join us inside my Millionaire Mindset program. This is where you'll start using my guided meditations to help you overcome anxiety and experience even more abundance. When you join, you'll have access to my entire audio library. Head over to elevatewithcarrie.com and we'll see you inside.